Hey, what's going on? Happy New Year, welcome back. It's definitely been a little while, but with Christmas and the holidays and all that stuff, you definitely get busy. Me and my wife thought it'd be a good idea to throw in a kitchen reno at the same time as well, so I've been really busy with that, but I have been doing some work on the car. I have been filming. Finally found some time to start editing and put all the footage together. And I don't know, it's not a lot goes on, but there's a lot that goes into it, if that makes any sense. And I don't know, I feel like I'm pretty detail oriented, so I kind of like to share my thought process, be as detailed as possible, and just, show people that, sometimes a lot of thought goes into the smallest things that you wouldn't even, think about. So I'm gonna start doing the engine bay, and there's a lot of stuff that I have to kind of work out and fix in the engine bay. So I'm gonna do a multiple part series and split up the video instead of making long 20+ minute videos. I really don't want to do that. I want to kind of make my videos 15 to 20 minutes max. But with that being said, hopefully you enjoy the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Alright, so my next order of business will be to take care of these frame rails. If you saw my previous video, I briefly showed that both sides of the frame rail have been notched out for whatever reason. I know this car had a twin turbo setup before, and the turbo's pretty much sat where these notches are. I don't know if it was like a clearance issue or whatever, but honestly, I have no idea why you'd want to notch out or cut out the frame rails. Believe it or not, when I looked over the car, I completely missed this this aspect. Maybe it had to do with just being excited to see the car. I did open the hood, looked through it, everything looked good. There was a bunch of wires and power steering and all that stuff, kind of camouflaging these things. But at the end of the day, I didn't see it, so that's my fault, obviously. Quick little tidbit: I actually drove 18 hours. Down south to get this car with a couple of friends, put on a trailer, drove it 18 hours back, so I was really not trying to come back with an empty trailer. So, and I mean, I had a chance to look over it, so that's my fault for not really seeing it. But at the end of the day, I just got to fix it. The good news is I did pull some of those measurements from those spec sheets that they have for body shops to realign frames and whatever, and they have all these measurements you can take to make sure everything's back into spec. All the measurements that I took on this car, and they're all pretty much within spec, so nothing shifted, nothing bent. I mean, if you get in an accident, this shit will be the first thing to crumple, right? So definitely not the way I would have done it. I mean, maybe it was a space issue, I have no idea, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty hack thing to do. Definitely not the way I would have done it. Definitely not the way a lot of people would have done it. So there are no signs of other damage from what I can see. I know the engine bay was painted previously. These rubber stoppers have overspray on them, and the engine bay is just too glossy, and you can see the paint peeling off in certain areas. So engine bay was definitely repainted at some point. I don't think it was ever in an accident. All the spot welds and all the seams look perfect. The sheet metal looks perfect. Everything's straight, like I said. So, I mean, if you're looking on the bright side, another good thing is they're cut on an angle, so there's more area to weld to versus just having it straight cut. So that's a good thing. Either way, I think this is going to be a pain in the ass to match up, but just because I'm not too experienced with this type of stuff. But I mean, part of the reason why I want to take on this project is just to learn a lot of stuff, acquire some skills and experience that, will stick with you for the rest of your life. So any, future projects down the road, I'll be that much more confident and that much more experienced when I do these types of things. And that's also the reason why some of this stuff takes me a little longer. I'm not just going to go in here and weld metal without really testing and practicing on some scraps, you know, simulating basically the same situation I have on the car. Put it on the bench, practice my welding, practice you know, good penetration with the welds, make sure everything's in good order. So you can look at it as a huge negative, and then you can, you know, either be miserable about it, or you can look at it as an opportunity to just take it, run with it, and turn it into something positive. And I mean, that goes for any facet of your life, really. I actually sourced out some frame rails. I went out to a wrecking yard and actually took a Sawzall and cut out sections of an SN95 frame rail. So I'll have the exact same, you know, metal. I won't have to spend time shaping and bending up sheet metal. It'll actually be from the factory, so hopefully I can match up the factory holes and all that stuff and get it pretty much within spec of how it looked from the factory. It doesn't really matter because it's all going to be covered up. I have like the new fender aprons that go here, and then I have the frame rail sills that will completely cover everything up, but definitely want to do it right. I don't want to just, you know, I could essentially just weld a piece of metal on top here, weld a piece of metal here at the bottom, and call it a day, but I want to make it look as, you know, as nice as possible. I'm going to try my best, see what happens. So once these are done, I can go ahead and start cutting these out and start doing the fender aprons and start really, you know, progressing on the engine bay. I think I'll do the engine bay before I do the torque boxes, because the torque boxes, honestly, that is going to be a huge job. Probably going to get some help. But even before the torque boxes are done, I'm going to drop the IRS out of the Cobra. Make sure the Cobra's mounting points actually fit into the new torque boxes that I bought. And if they don't, if they're too wide, because you hear sometimes you gotta widen up the torque boxes on the Mustangs to fit the IRS, the bushing and the lower control arm mount. So I'm gonna see how it fits. There might be some modification required, but once I'm confident in how everything's gonna fit, I'll start cutting out the metal on this car. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the engine bay, focus on measuring these guys up, creating a template, transferring on to some metal, and see what happens. Alright, so I managed to cut out the piece of frame rail that I want to match up to this side here. What I also did was I removed the spot welds, because the top of the frame rail actually is just spot welded. So I think that'll be easier for me to match everything up, and it also will give me access into the channel for, you know, in case I want to weld from both sides, or, you know, in case I need access to the channel or whatever. But this piece came out okay. It didn't come out the greatest, to be honest. And I think the reason for that is when I drew up the template, you're banking on the transfer of the template to be absolutely spot on to the new piece of metal. So if you're shifting it, you know, one way or another, you're going to throw off the angle of these, and you're going to throw off the top angle. And I think it was just wishful thinking to make the stencil in one shot and then cut it out in one shot. And I'll show you what I mean. So, piece fits, like everything fits fairly well. there are some gaps. I had to constantly remeasure and grind off some material to make it all fit, just because of all the weird angles from the top and the bottom and the side, but I got it to fit. The only thing is some of the gaps are a little bigger than I want them to be. I mean, they're not horrible, but they're not great. Over here they're okay. At the bottom here it's probably like 1/8 or slightly bigger. That's probably the biggest gap I have. The good news is I have more material to try my hand at cutting out another one in case I'm not satisfied with these gaps, which I'll tell you right now, I'm not really satisfied with these gaps. So I'll probably be cutting out a new piece, try to get these gaps to fit a little tighter. I'm actually going to be deleting this ABS here, so worst case, if that piece turns out worse than this one, I'm going to use this piece. I don't think it's the end of the world. This piece will work just fine. I do have this copper backing piece that you can use to put behind the frame rail and put it behind the bigger gaps, and then the weld doesn't actually stick to the copper, and it'll disperse the metal more into the two plates that I'm trying to fuse. But like I said, I want to try to recut another piece, get it to fit a little bit tighter, and then go from there. We'll see what happens. This was originally from the driver's side. I had cut these out from 2 separate cars at the scrapyard, and what I managed to do is I managed to fill in the hole, welded that up nicely, smoothed it out, so now it's all ready to go. For the hole, or the factory hole that's here, I'm just going to, when I cut this out, it'll all be solid, so I'll just drill the hole to make it look like it was there from the factory. So basically my next step is just the same stuff I did earlier. I'm going to use my template, apply it onto this piece of frame rail. Basically just this side here and the bottom. And then once that's matched up, I'll worry about the top piece. Match it up, cut it out, and then plug weld it back to the other piece. So this is the new piece I cut out. Kind of ground it down a little bit, and it's a much better fit actually, so I'm probably going to use this piece. On camera you might not even tell a huge difference of the gaps, but the gaps are much tighter for this piece here. It doesn't look like there's a gap at all, and this is not aligned perfectly. I still have to align it, but basically there's like a 1/16 inch gap on each side, and then at the bottom. So that's exactly what I want. As you saw, I welded the hole at the bottom of this piece just because this piece does not go with this section of the frame rail. And then I'm going to be deleting the ABS, so it won't even matter. But yeah, I'm super happy with the fitment of this. I'm glad I actually took the time to cut another piece out. The next thing to do would be to just clean up the metal, grind all the metal down where I'm planning to weld, and then before I weld, I'm gonna grab some scrap pieces from the same piece I cut this frame rail out of, and I'm just gonna practice my welding, make sure the penetration, the penetration on this, especially a structural piece like this, is key. So I want to make sure I get good penetration throughout this whole weld. It's a pretty nice fit, nice and tight. There's a little bit of a gap because of this, I don't know, this like sloppy cut here, but it's looking really good. Happy with the fitment of it. So here's a better view after I've kind of filled in a little bit of material at the corner there. You can see it's a pretty nice and tight fit. This is a little bent out of shape, but I can bend that back no problem. Really happy with that. I'm just gonna grind that weld down, but you can see that little copper backer really helped. It was really easy to fill in the metal there. Now I just gotta grind it down. And then, let's see if I can grab the other piece. The other piece basically is gonna fit right in there. And you can see the gaps are really nice. It's a really nice and tight fit. I think I'm gonna leave that there for now. I'm gonna start working on the other side. Start cutting and shaping that one out. I'm just gonna take a straight edge and clean this cut up a little bit easier so I can match up the frame rail piece. I just have to grind a little bit over here so I can continue this gap. The bottom obviously is not leveled out, but it's going to be a real good fit. Passenger side, through a couple of tacks. There's the driver's side, same idea. The gaps are really good, really happy with it. Sits nice and flush, actually fit in like they're supposed to. It is a perfect fit.